Title 17 U.S. Code 512F provides penalties for the deliberate misrepresentation of copyright infringement. The owners and authors of this video, the common denominator, and the Paramistic Broadcast Channel are a nonprofit 501c3 exempt organization and believes in good faith that it constitutes educational fair use, as per Title 17 U.S.C. 107. Persons, agencies, attorneys, and or social media algorithms filing a false or frivolous Digital Millennium Copyright Act complaint may be subject to civil liability. Warning: the following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Accordingly, viewer discretion is advised.
Happy Hump Day! Happy Hump Day! As always, I pledge my allegiance to the Constitution of the United States of America, and to the republic for which the flag stands, one nation under Almighty God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You know, folks, I can't make this up. You guys know what I want to write for a book. I know you've been watching. And now you're on other channels, so I don't get to see too many of your comments, but that's a good thing. In the meantime, I always open up with a quote. And as I've been able to emphasize before, sometimes it's within minutes of a program, but never, I don't believe ever have I had a guest offer me a quote that I thought was relevant for where we are at, and more importantly, where we should be going. But here you go, folks. I hope I can read this correctly. How monotonously alike are the great tyrants and conquerors have been, and how gloriously different are the saints. What this is basically saying is they're remembered for all the evil that they do, and yet the saints individually are glorified because of the great things they have done. So in contrast between tyrants and saints, that highlights the profound differences in their actions, their motivations, and the impact of the world. For a couple of months now, I've been under a lot of stress. February 15th, I was relieved of the pressure for a moment. Just a moment, hit something today, hit a nice little bump today. But you know, with every little bump that you go on, the struggles and path that we go on, we're going to go somewhere. Well, I met an individual on Facebook, and he suggested that I reach out to a certain gentleman. So I had the number for a couple of days, and I had to think about it. And today I called this gentleman up. Again, I can't make this up. Okay. But this gentleman is precisely who I know I need. And God, unbelievably, God walked this man into my life. I'm very proud to present a gentleman who's working for the people here in America. Tanawah Downing, sir. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no, bless you. I mean, I like to say the interviews I do, Tanawah, are I walk into a bar, I sit down, I get myself a mug of beer. You're sitting there, I'm sitting there having a beer, and we just start talking.
Yeah.
And,
Choice encounters.
What's that?
It's choice encounters. It's God bringing the right people into the right situation, right place, the right time.
Correct. I said a divine intervention and a divine appointment, because believe it or not, I had no idea of. I know I wanted to do a show program tonight on the freedom of speech. I know we are going to hit on that for a moment, and I'm looking forward to this. But you know, we can agree to disagree. There's no problem with that. But that's just it. That it comes down to just respect, and it just seems as though people have not only lost respect for others, but they seemingly have lost respect for themselves.
Yeah.
And some people, on the other hand, I know myself, I hold myself to a certain standard of integrity and honor. You don't know that of me. We only met literally 15, 20 minutes of a phone call. Am I correct?
Yeah.
I told you a bit of the situation I'm in. You were assistful in speaking with me. But it's because, excuse me, it's because of what I've been going through. I'm living in a different world. I can't believe my constitutional rights personally have been violated. And you're doing a tour right now as we speak. It's called We Shall Be Free Tour 2023. Can you give me just a little information more about that for everyone so they know what this is about?
Yeah. So when the people are silent, we give our consent and we allow government to do things to us that they would not otherwise be able to do because we don't speak up and speak out and demand that they do things right. So our consent derives from our silence. Now, when government's silent, that is an indication of guilt because there is no right to self-defense for a public official. A public official that breaks the law has no right to defend himself and say, I'm justified in breaking the law. Therefore, when government is silent, that is an indication of its guilt. So understanding that, we have a lot of public officials across the country that are acting illegally and unconstitutionally, and they're not doing anything about it. And so I'm going to take advantage of their silence. And so this Saturday, we're actually leaving right now. We're leaving Washington D.C., getting ready to start heading toward Missouri to get this started on Saturday. But starting on Saturday, we're gonna begin the tour, and we've been planning this for about a year and getting funding and plan into place. But we're doing 40 press conferences at 40 state capitals over the course of 40 days, leading back to Washington, D.C. here, where I'm going to be presenting oral arguments on behalf of people in the United States for the deprivation of rights and freedoms that have been deprived of them by this government. We're going to be at the Supreme Court on June 6th, 2024, presenting what is going to be the biggest civil rights case in American history, affecting every single United States citizen. And it's a real honor that God chose me to be able to help do this. But this tour is an opportunity where we're going to be standing physically on the doorsteps of these individuals, and we're going to let them come out and have a debate if they want. But we already know that they're not going to do it because, of course, there's nothing to debate. So I'm going to take advantage of their silence, and I'm going to control the narrative. So we're going to get out there, and instead of defending the people, because people have nothing to defend themselves against, we're going to start pointing to the crimes that are being committed against the people of the United States by these agents of government with supposed delegated authority, which is no authority whatsoever. Because a maxim of law is you cannot break the law in order to enforce the law. That any act that is unlawful from the start does not become lawful over time, nor does it become lawful over subsequent legislation created. So, understanding that, if we can point to any point in time in any one of these cases, be it a child protective services case, whether it is a criminal adjudication, whether it's a guardianship case, if we can point to any moment within that process where the constitutional rights were violated, then everything that derives from that moment forward must also be unconstitutional because it's tainted by the illegality of the way it is obtained. Wrong will always produce wrong, only right can produce right. So as long as our government officials are doing things wrong, then that means that what they're producing must also be wrong. If you violate the Constitution, then what you produce is also going to be unconstitutional because of your own actions. So we're no longer going to defend ourselves. We're going to come out and we're going to start talking about the crimes that have been committed against the people of the United States. And in doing so, we are going on offense and we're putting government on defense. It's time for us to take control of this. It's fourth and goal right now. We got one play left. Let's go ahead and make this happen in the next 40 days. No longer defending ourselves. We're now going on offense and we're going to start talking about the crimes that were committed in the pursuance of something that is now unconstitutional as a result of your actions.
You know, I explained to you it was the opinion of a deputy that I get charged with. They have to do what is called a post certification, and then they have to take an oath to the office, but they're also protected by a form of an immunity. I can't think of the word offhand.
Sovereign immunity.
Is it sovereign immunity?
Yeah, they claim sovereign immunity. And I would love to talk about that actually, because I didn't get the chance to on Sunday on my last show, but that is a topic that this is something that I need to get the information out to people. So if you don't mind, as soon as you finish, I'd love to. Okay, so there's a history behind sovereign immunity. And I want everybody to understand, because once you understand this, then things are going to start to make sense. So sovereign immunity derives from what's known as the king can do no wrong, right? So in English tradition, the king, he created the laws, and as a result, he can't violate the laws. Therefore, you can't sue a king or charge a king with a crime without his consent. He must give his consent and say, yes, I broke the law. Otherwise, all he does is just change the law, and he's sovereign. And so as a result, he grants immunity onto all of his agents so that they can operate on his own behalf. So he grants sovereign immunity onto his agents. That's the origin of sovereign immunity. So the king creates the laws in English tradition, and as a result, he can't break the laws because he just changed them. So he grants his immunity onto his agents. Well, here in America, the truth is that we, the people, create the laws. So the sovereignty derives from the people of the United States. We are sovereign, and we created this individual, this office, in our sovereignty because of the freedom for us to be able to do so. So we cannot claim that anyone is above the law. No one is immune from their liability criminally, and the Supreme Court has actually upheld this. case called in 1978 called Imbler versus Pac-Man, the United States Supreme Court decided that even judges cloaked with absolute civil immunity for centuries could still be held criminally liable for willful deprivations of constitutional rights. Now, the gap there is there's two different types of immunity. There is criminal liability immunity and there's civil liability immunity. Now, you can't sue the agent civilly for his actions because he's only performing mechanical duties on behalf of his master. So if his master tells him to go and do something because it created the laws, in other words, the state creates a law, gives it to the judge, says, Judge, here, go and enforce this law. Well, of course, you wouldn't sue the agent because he's simply performing the mechanical duties on behalf of the master. You sue the master for the actions of the agent. But before you have liability, before you have civil liability, before you can sue and have standing in court, you must first show that someone had a duty and an obligation and they breached that obligation, and that comes by way of civil or criminal liability. So before you can sue for civil liability of government, you must first show that government breached their obligation, and you do that through the criminal liability of the agent. So these agents of government, they're not criminally immune. They're to be held criminally liable. But how do we get past it? Because the system itself actually protects them and defends them because it recognizes the fact that if they're found guilty of something, then that gives rise to injunctive relief and civil remedy. So, but therein lies the issue. It's a catch-22. You don't sue the agent because they're just doing what the master told them to do. You sue the master. But before you can sue the master, you must first show that an agent did something wrong, right? And you have to do both these. But so the history behind sovereign immunity here in America, anyway. 1793 was the very first case that was ever presented to the United States Supreme Court. It was a case called Chisholm versus Georgia. And in this case, what happened was that an individual from South Carolina, Chisholm, was suing the state of Georgia for failing to pay bonds, right? And so the Supreme Court came together. This is the very first challenge to immunity that ever existed. It was the first case that the Supreme Court ever heard. And what the Supreme Court decided in a 4-1 decision was that the states gave up their sovereignty in order to join the Union and subject themselves to the supremacy of the United States Constitution and laws of the United States. So the states cannot be sovereign because they gave up their sovereignty to subject themselves to a higher law or a higher authority. Now, the definition of a sovereign state is complete in itself, not subject to a government whose laws it's subjected to. So if you're a state that's subject to a higher law or a higher government, you cannot be sovereign. Now, the definition of a non-sovereign state is not complete in itself, subjected to a higher government. So in order to be complete in itself, there's like 4 different tests, and the easiest is typically, can that state engage in international trade? And the answer is no. The states cannot engage in international trade because the Constitution has said that only the Congress of the United States can engage in international trade. Therefore, the very first step in determining sovereignty is they fail because they cannot engage in international trade because the Constitution has said that only Congress of the United States can do it. So the very first case that was ever heard here in America was all about sovereignty, and they said, nope, states do not have sovereignty. And so that started it all. And so what happened then was that the states threw a fit, right? They threw a fit and they said, oh, this can't be. We're sovereign. We didn't give up anything. And so then 1795, we passed the 11th Amendment, right? Right or wrong, we passed it. But what the 11th Amendment says, and you got to read it, is it says that a citizen of one state cannot sue a different state. So it partially technically overrode Chisholm, and it allowed for the states to be sovereign with regard to a citizen in one state suing a different state. So it resolved the Chisholm issue where a South Carolinian was suing Georgia, but it made no mention at all whatsoever about a citizen suing his own state. Nowhere in the 11th Amendment does it say a citizen in his own state cannot sue the state that he lives in, his own state. So there's the 11th Amendment. Now you fast forward to 1890, and there's a whole bunch of cases, major cases, like Cohen versus Virginia, McCulloch versus Maryland, Martin versus Hunter's Lessee, major Supreme Court cases that every single one of them say that states are not sovereign. Again and again and again, you can sue. But what happened then is that in 1890, there was another case that came forward to the Supreme Court, Hans versus Louisiana, 1890. This was to the Waite Court. Now you have to understand that the Waite Court, Chief Justice Waite, he was not a very good American, right? He was sympathetic to the slavery institution. He wanted to see the advancement of the slavery institution, and he wanted to proliferate the institution of slavery. Now, we know this because he made it on his own statements. He made statements to the effect that the 14th Amendment may be in existence and on the books forever, but we intend to make it a dead letter. So he intended to undermine the Reconstruction Amendments, 13th, 14th, and 15th, after the Civil War, that were designed to reconstruct America and bring equality finally to the American population. But he intended to undermine those and to make them ineffective, and he's done that successfully now for 180 years. So 1890, case Hans versus Louisiana comes forward. Hans was suing his state, and the court came out in the ruling, and they said, we don't read the Constitution literally, we read it figuratively, and we interpret that its meaning is that the states are sovereign and immune. Therefore, you cannot sue a state without their consent, and thus born sovereign immunity. Now, the issue with that is that the judicial branch has no constituted authority to be able to alter, amend, or destroy the Constitution of the United States. That must be done in accordance with the special amending procedures of Article 5, and the only way to change it is not through judicial fiat or unilateral change by a state enacting its own legislation. It must be done by the people of the United States in accordance with the special amending procedure. Any other way would be an act of sedition done by traitors to the nation. So when the Supreme Court says, I believe that I'm going to change the Constitution and I'm going to bring in this significant decision that's going to have significant impact to people in the United States, well, that would be altering the Constitution of the United States through judicial fiat without doing it in the proper way. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that you cannot sue your own state. Nowhere. Now, there's a reason why the Wake Court chose to do this, all right? And you have to understand that for the history of that court, ever since the day that it was put into place, that court has been put into place rulings that have been undermining the Constitution, rulings that have been undermining the Union, because if the Constitution got its way, they would all be out of a job, because the Constitution has declared that all men are to be free. You see, peace and harmony doesn't create conflict and crime. Conflict and crime makes them and their institution a lot of money. So that court does not want peace and harmony among all the geographical governments, all the dispersed governments of the 50 regional governments. They don't want that, because that would not create revenue for their institution. Crime and conflict creates a lot of money. Therefore, these rulings that they put in place are intended in order to be able to build their business up, because government is in the business of enslavement. Now, the deceptive purpose behind it goes back to a case called Dred Scott versus Sanford. Dred Scott versus Sanford was 1857. It was the precursor to the Civil War. It was a significant decision. What happened was this individual, Mr. Scott, he was a slave, and his master brought him from a slave territory into a free territory, and he's now in free land. And he said, you know what? I'm going to petition the Supreme Court for my freedom. So he filed a petition. Well, the Supreme Court, they didn't want to make that decision. They didn't want to open up the floodgates to allow these slaves to go free. The Civil War hadn't even started yet. And so they wanted to prevent this individual, this slave, from being able to receive his freedom. So they had to figure out a way that they didn't have to make the ruling, because they knew that if they made the ruling, they would have to side with Dred Scott, because, yes, he's in free territory. So to have standing in federal court, you have to, one, be a person, two, you have to be directly impacted by the law. So they knew that he was directly impacted by slave law because he's a slave, right? That's the whole issue in question. So they couldn't say that he's not impacted by the law. So they had to say that he's not a person. And what the court conceived was this. First off, they said that citizen and person are synonymous with one another. They mean the same thing. And then the court went on to say that blacks are not and were not intended to be included under the word citizen in the Constitution. Blacks are so far inferior that they have no rights which the white man was bound to respect. Slaves are private property protected by the Constitution. So when they say that blacks are not and were not intended to be included under the word citizen in the Constitution, but then they said that citizen and person are synonymous with one another, then if blacks are not a citizen, it also means that blacks are not a person. And as a result, Mr. Scott, you do not have standing in federal court. We do not have to hear your case. Go back to the state, argue with them for your freedom. And that was the reason why they did it. They dismissed the case and said that you are not a person, you are a slave, and slaves are protected property. Wow. So then the Civil War happens. We go through the Civil War. We fight this war. 1 million men die as a result of what we believe we were fighting for. We were fighting for the equality of all men. And I don't care what anyone says. That's what Americans believe in. That's what those honorable men died on those battlefields doing was they were fighting for the equality of all men. And I don't want anyone to tell me anything different, because I myself am a veteran. I fought with honor. I still fight with honor today. These men that are out there serving our country and dying for our country, they are not doing it for anything less than honor. That's their belief. Now, there could be reasons for corporations and these other institutions that are doing it for deceptive reasons. But don't you dare tell me that any one of these brothers and sisters that are out there fighting and dying are doing it for any reason other than honor. All right. We don't want to do that. So we fight this war. 1 million of our brothers and sisters die in this war fighting for the equality of all men. And then we get past the war and we create the 14th Amendment, which was supposed to create equality among all men, right? That if for the first time, all men were going to be created and treated equally, no matter where they choose to reside within the jurisdiction of the United States. But before the 14th Amendment was enacted, we wanted to make sure that slavery doesn't exist here in America anymore. Let's create a constitutional amendment that abolishes slavery, and let's get it done. So we passed the 13th Amendment. The problem is that the 13th Amendment does not abolish slavery. Do not kid yourself. There is still slavery here in America. It's all across the country. It's in every single jurisdiction within the United States, because the 13th Amendment doesn't say that you can't have slavery. What it says is neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist except as punishment for crime. Well, the moment you say except, it means that you can have slavery, but you have to call it justice from now on, right? So we simply took something, we retitled it something different, we changed it from a private institution to a public institution, and then we told the people it doesn't exist anymore. It does. That is the reason why we now have mass incarceration and an 800% increase in the prison population over the last 30 years. That's why we have 16 times more prisoners than the next closest industrialist nation. That's why we have 5% of the world's human population, but 26% of the world's prison population, is because these states have realized they can make tens of billions of dollars off the forced involuntary servitude of the weakest, most vulnerable in our society by simply labeling them a criminal, right? These are our brothers and sisters, and that's a slavery institution. They cannot continue to go to a place that we call a sweatshop in China, but a prison here in America. That's not prison. That's slavery. That's a slavery institution. And so what happened was that at the point of the 13th Amendment, we made the slave owner the state. The state is now the slave owner, right? And as the slave owner, recognizing that, Chief Justice Waite said, let's go ahead and memorialize Dred Scott. Let's make it so that a slave can never get as close as Dred Scott did to winning their freedom. And let's make the slave owner immune. Let's make it so that the slaves cannot sue in federal court for their freedom, so that we never have to get rid of the slavery institution. That's the reason why sovereign immunity was born, was in order to preserve and protect the slave owner from the slaves being able to sue in federal court for their freedom, which was a direct correlation to the Dred Scott ruling. And that's why what we have in place today. So sovereign immunity does not exist, because nowhere in the Constitution does it say that you are immune. Now, it's also constitutionally codified, and I want you to understand it's constitutionally codified. So the origin of words is very, very interesting, word etymology. And so in English tradition, right, because remember, the king can do no wrong, therefore you can't charge a king with a crime or sue a king without his consent. Well, the due process, the process of creating a criminal, or the due process, it starts like this, or goes like this: that if you choose to violate the law, you incur a debt to which you are charged and then called to account so you can pay the debt. These are all accounting terms, right? But the way that debt normally works is, if I want to purchase something from a store, a bill will first be generated, which I sign and accept. Then my account is charged and I incur a debt to which I then have to pay. That's the process of any transaction that anyone can understand. However, if the store charges a person's account without billing them first, that would be fraud, because you must always bill before charge is generated. Well, the very first step in any criminal process is a bill of indictment. So when you don't have a bill of indictment, you are being charged fraudulently because you're not being billed first. Now, the way that this applies into English tradition is that a king in England was known as nobility, meaning that you cannot bill a king for a crime because he has nobility. He is noble, right? That is the origin of that word. Nobility means that you cannot bill him. Now, where it ties into the Constitution of the United States and why our founders were as smart as they were, was that an indictment is called a bill. Therefore, you can't bill these judges for their crimes because they have nobility. Nobility, right?
Okay.
However, Article 1, Section 9 of the United States Constitution says that the United States shall not create heritages of nobility. Article 1, Section 10 says that no state shall have patents of nobility. Therefore, no person can have nobility here in America. Everyone is billable for the crimes that they've committed because you cannot have nobility. And therein lies the constitutional truth that exists. A judge is not noble. He does not have a title that makes him immune because every single person is equally as accountable for their actions against the sovereigns, such as myself, such as you, or anyone else. If they violate our freedom, then just as the Supreme Court said in 1978, that even judges cloaked with absolute civil immunity for centuries can still be held criminally liable for willful deprivations of constitutional rights. That's what this tour is about. We're going to bring this out into the open, and we're going to say you don't have immunity, because if you choose to violate that which you promise to support and defend and protect, don't expect that it's going to protect you for having violated it. The law doesn't protect you when you willfully choose to violate it in order to offend the very people that it's designed to protect. There is no immunity. The law is on our side, and we're now going to bring this forward, and we're going to say, here's the line in the sand. Government officials, you're currently acting outside of the law, which means that your actions are unlawful, and a criminal is nothing more than one who transgressed the law. So you're criminals today. So you can remain criminals if you want to continue to do things the way you're doing it today. But if you don't, then you will return to the established rule of law, and you will work with me on how we're going to move forward as a nation consistent with what the law demands, because we will not compromise on the law. So we're going to draw this line in the sand. We're going to give them an opportunity to decide which side of the law you want to be on, because today you're on the unlawful side, and that makes you a criminal. So we're going to call them out for the criminals that they are, and we're going to give them an opportunity to decide, do you want to remain that, or do you want to come back to the established rule of law? Do you want to mitigate your liability or culpability within the criminal conspiracy that's in place to undermine the laws of the United States? You want to return to established rule of law and thus obey the will of the people and do your job and discharge the duties of your office consistent with what the law demands.
Well, when in our conversation, and it was very quick, very brief, there were things I didn't even get to touch on, which was good. Heath here, by the way. Hey, Ruthie, how are you, dear? Heath here says that the deputy is protected under qualified immunity. So in the case that, in this particular case with myself, in a deposition, I have this in black and white. It was my opinion to charge him, and there were no victims.
So immunity, you have to read immunity. I want all of you guys to go out, get out your Black Law Dictionary, look up immunity: judicial immunity, qualified immunity, prosecutorial immunity. Look up those three definitions. What you're going to find is that it says immunity from civil liability. All three of them say civil liability. It does not say anything about criminal liability. They are not immune from criminal liability. They are immune from civil liability because their master is responsible for the actions of the agent. Yes, the officers have qualified immunity, but qualified immunity means that you sue their master for the actions of the agent. But before you have action civilly against the master, you must first show that an agent breached their obligation, committed a crime, broke the law. Those are the steps that have to be done. So yes, they have qualified immunity, but qualified immunity only means that you cannot sue them. It does not mean that you can't hold them criminally liable. You absolutely can hold them criminally liable, and that's done through a criminal affidavit that's submitted to your local jurisdiction. That's the obstruction that I'm going to be clearing up here at the United States Supreme Court. We're going to clear up that obstruction. We're going to make it so that you guys are now able to come in and hold them accountable for their criminal acts against you.
In other words, there would be a form that, for instance, I could walk in, take it, and present it to the court, and present or plead my case to the court. Now, in my situation, and I told you I wasn't happy with them because of the type of felony and I was guilty before innocent, by the way, because it was a type of felony that they gave me. I had to submit my DNA. I had to turn over my CCW card, and I was not allowed to drink any alcoholic beverages or, of course, do drugs. I don't do drugs. But, I mean, I couldn't even enjoy technically a glass of wine at dinner. Tanawah, did I have a glass of wine periodically? I think maybe not. I'm sorry. I like my wine every now and then.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is it was the idea that I knew if had been found guilty, they were going after 4 years of my life in prison, $10,000 fine. I would have lost my house, my 3 cars, my 3 cats. My life would have been gone. Now, I knew there was no case there. Even my attorney said, this is a witch hunt. And I had opened up with my attorney, Cale Griffin of Cameron. Good little shout out to you. You're a good guy. I had opened up with, like Trump, this is a witch hunt. And 5 months later, after an arraignment, he says to me, getting ready for a preliminary, he says, boy, this is a witch hunt. I said, what was the first thing I told you? I go, first line out of my mouth. I mean, the stuff that Trump's undergoing, the stuff that I had to undergo personally, and I know of a few other cases, people have been held in jail. They lost their businesses, their houses, their families.
Yeah.
Almost 5 years has passed. I know a guy right now who sat in jail for almost 10 months. Ultimately, the case was dismissed and never even went to trial.
Yeah.
How do you give that back 10 months of his life when I could have been sitting in jail, by the way. I'm not, and by the way, I'm not upset over the fact that I didn't go. But yeah. I couldn't present a bond or a bail. They weren't going to let me bond out. Have you heard of that before?
Every single day. So one thing that you need to understand is that the wealthy are the ones out here making the laws, right? These politicians up here in DC, they're multimillionaires. They're all very wealthy. And the wealthy don't create laws that will impact them, right? Because who would do that? Why would I create a law that would impact me? You know, a great example is tobacco. So cigarettes today, if you were to go buy a pack of cigarettes, you know, in Virginia, you're going to spend $11, $12 for just a pack of Marlboro, right? That's how much you're going to spend, because the majority of that money goes to taxes. It's sin tax, right? But if you were to go and buy a pound of tobacco, pipe tobacco, then you wouldn't pay any tax on that whatsoever. You can buy a pound of pipe tobacco for $12, and you can roll 3 cartons of cigarettes from that. Now, why is that? It's because the wealthy smoke cigars and pipes. They don't smoke cigarettes. Only poor smoke cigarettes. So, of course, the wealthy doesn't want to tax their own stuff. So they don't create taxes against the bulk tobacco. They create taxes against the cigarettes, because poor people smoke cigarettes. The rich people do not. So you need to understand that the laws that are created today are created in order to generate revenue. And the way that the rich generate revenue is at the expense of the poor, right? So you just mentioned bail. Bail is an interesting thing, because the only reason why you remain in jail is because you're too poor to get out. Therefore, you are absolutely being punished for no reason other than being poor. So, you know, if you're arrested and put into jail, and they say, well, you got a $250 bail, but this person's poor, he's going to remain there. And anybody that remains in jail has got more than 80% likelihood of going to prison, right? Because you don't get, once you get into jail and you remain there, you have a major likelihood of winding up in an institution. Now, if you get out, you have an 80% likelihood of not going to jail, right? If you remain out on bail. So the whole bail system is a great illustration of the fact that the poor are being punished for no reason other than being poor. And this happens every single day. That's the reason why those people are in jail. And that's the reason why they remain in jail, is because they don't have enough money to buy their way out, because the criminal justice system is about enslaving the poor, right? You don't go to prison if you have money, right? If you're wealthy. And so, you know, what that's one thing that I try to get people to understand, is that slavery and racism Slavery is not about race. We think that it is. We think that it was white versus black, but you need to understand that was a diversionary tactic that was created by our government in order to pit the people against each other. Because as long as we're fighting with each other, then we don't realize that it's the government that's the true antagonist. Because slavery is an economic issue. It's not a race issue. It's economics, right? That's why it's a counting system. And so with economics, it becomes a matter of who becomes enslaved. Well, the people that are too poor to be able to pay for their debt that's owed to society, right? Because the history of slavery is if you owe a debt to someone, you can't pay that debt. You could sell yourself into slavery to settle the debt. That's the history of every single slavery institution that's ever existed in history, and it's no different than ours. You owe a debt to society. You're too poor to pay it. You sell yourself into slavery, and you go into involuntary servitude in a for-profit state-run industry for the benefit of the state called a slave. So no, this is exactly what happens every single day, and it's time for us to come to terms with that. It's time for the American people to understand that what they believe in is not real, because justice is a compromise between two evils. Justice is neither good nor bad, because just as Plato said in the book The Republic, good is to commit injustice, bad is to suffer injustice. So good would be to accuse another of wrongdoing. And the reason why good is bad is because if you're repaying evil with evil, you're just creating evil. And good is incapable of doing such an act. Now, we know that what we call good here in America is not good because they're out killing people with absolute impunity. Of the 1,500 people that our nation has put to death, 139 of them have been proven to have been innocent after they were murdered, right? 139. Another 186 have been exonerated. That's one out of every 8 have been exonerated, found to have been not guilty after they were placed on the death row. Between those two numbers alone, we are at 18% of the people on death row, and those are just the ones that we know because we still have evidence available, DNA or whatever, to be able to exonerate that 139. That is not good when we're killing people with absolute impunity. So we need America to understand that what you believe in is not real. What we call good is not good. Because if you were to open up the criminal procedure manual written by a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals judge in California, if you were to open up to the preface, go down to the 4th paragraph, it says most prosecutors across the United States agree that as much as 15% of the people in prison are innocent, but that is an acceptable deviance because our system is not perfect. So here in America, just as Benjamin Franklin said, that it's better that 1,000 go free than for one innocent man to suffer. That was the foundation of our system, was that we wanted to protect the innocent from having to suffer. And yet we have the institution saying, well, sorry, it's just the luck of the draw. Our law is not perfect. Well, before you call something imperfect, I would suggest that you use it the way that it was designed to be used. Don't blame your laziness or your incompetence on the system, right? Because you're missing this, the very first step, right? If you don't have jurisdiction, if an indictment is required, if you have to use a specific judicial test, if you are not following the rules, then don't blame the system when we have innocent suffering all across America. So here in America, I know that I used to be this way as well. You know, for years and years and years, I would drive by a prison. I'd say everybody that's there deserves to be there because here in America, innocence doesn't suffer because we have the greatest justice system in the world. Because I believe in those things because that's what I was told to believe in. But once you understand and you can actually see the true mechanics of the system, you come to understand that what I believe in isn't real. But I believe it can be. It can be. But we have to decide as a nation, do we believe in good, out killing people with absolute impunity, or do we believe in what created this nation and what freed all American citizens, that which we all believe in? Do we believe in it, or do we believe in good, out killing people? And once we decide what we believe in, then we can decide which direction we want to go. Do we want to have good, out killing people and follow it? In which case, that's fine. We're heading in the right direction then. But if we want to go in a different direction, then I say, let's return to our faith in the supreme law of the land. Let's learn how to follow it. Let's learn how to obey it. And let's head in the right direction now. Because we've been going in the wrong direction for long enough and it's produced a wrong result. Wrong will always produce wrong. Let's make a right decision today. Let's go ahead and obey the supreme law of the land. And let's take our country in the right direction because the right decision will always produce the right outcome.
You know, you're right on that. The thing is, I hear phrases as such. big government. It's too large. The government's too large. We have bureaucrats. You look at Anthony Fauci, my opinion, the man should be arrested. That's my opinion. With the knowledge I know of SARS, COVID, SARS-19, the whole gamut, he should be put away. But because he's under Biden's administration, he's protected for the moment. The thing is, it seems like you let no good. I think I heard this once. Let no good deed go unpunished. So when you have scenarios as such, that people are wrongfully accused, allegedly did this, but wrongfully accused, and their name is slandered, it's libeled, it's the defamation of the character. You start realizing identity fraud. In my case, I had my identity, I believe, compromised. I'm working closely with, by the way, folks, if you have your identity compromised, work closely with your banks, work closely with your credit cards, and if you can somehow get with LifeLock, Norton on my computer I have, go with LifeLock. And prepaid legal every now and then doesn't help. I mean, doesn't hurt. You get rid of tickets real quick. But the thing that I'm seeing is it's the aftercurrent, the name calling. In my case, I've been hearing words like pedophile, which I absolutely hate. They are the worst of the worst, in my opinion. And they should die slowly, in my opinion, again. Execution. Those that rape, molest, and incest. And you've got that serial individual. Again, that's just my opinion. I've seen other cases where, like you were saying, DNA does save someone, and that's a good thing. But what are you hoping to get through? I think it would be the deprivation of rights. Is that what you're working on primarily?
Yeah. So what I'm doing more than anything else is I'm not saying that anyone is innocent. I don't know, and I honestly don't care. That's between them and God. So I'm not fighting for anyone's innocence, right? Because I don't know. But what I do know is that they're not guilty, because guilt is a process, and you must follow that process. So the way that I like to say it is that the issue of criminality, right? The way that we're trying to handle it from the bottom up is never going to work. It will never work, right? Because when we go out and we arrest the people, well, if our country is being led by criminals, people that are acting outside of the law and the agreed upon code of conduct established by the majority, the very laws that create their office and give them their authority, then that means that our country is going to be led toward crime, which is then going to create environments of criminality, and that will then produce a society of criminals. So the issue of criminality, it must be done from the top down. Before we can deal with the criminality of people, we must first deal with the criminality of leadership. We must first ensure that we have leaders that are leading our country in a lawful direction out of love, faith, obedience to the law, and respect for the will of the people and what they want. And until we do that, we're not heading in a good direction. So again, if our country is embezzling money and sending it over to Ukraine, then obviously our people are going to be in an environment where they themselves can embezzle money. But then we go out and we arrest the people and say, "Oh, you're doing this crime," when those that are arresting them are doing 50 times more of the exact same crime. So, when you act outside of the law in a leadership capacity, we're simply a product of our environment, just like children are a product of their environment. So if my wife and I, we create an abusive and oppressive environment, we will produce abusive and oppressive children, because the children are a product of the environment that they grow up in. A man is a product of the environment that he's in. So if our leaders create environments of criminality because they're criminals, embezzling billions of dollars, committing extortion every single day, killing and murdering people, then why would we not expect our society to be led in the wrong direction? So we need to decide as people, do we want to continue to follow criminals and thus become a criminal nation, right? Or do we want to say, you know what, I don't like the direction that criminals have been taking me, and I'm going to go the other direction now. I'm going to go the direction of lawfulness, and we'll leave those criminals behind. And those criminals can take with them the laws that imprison and incriminate. because the Constitution of the United States says all men are to be free. So again, one thing that I want people to understand as far as what I'm doing is that I'm not saying open up the doors to these prisons, let these people out, let them go, have chaos and what I am saying is that don't look at the outcome, right? Don't look at the outcome. That's what the government's going to want you to do over the next 40 days as I do these press conferences. That's what you're going to continually hear is if this happens, look at what will happen. Look at all these children that will be back in abusive homes. Look at all these parents or these adults that will be let go and out killing people. We can't look at the outcome. Once again, wrong will always produce wrong, right will always produce right. So we got to look at the issue. And if the issue today, if what we're doing is not acting lawfully, then obviously that's produced a wrong outcome. I think we can all agree that we are in a wrong place right now, inconsistent with what we expect within America. You said it yourself just at the introduction. You said this doesn't even feel like America. Well, the reason why it doesn't feel like America is because the only thing that makes America America is American laws. So failure to adhere to American law, you're no longer in.
Oh, wow. I believe we've lost him. I'm hoping that maybe he can come back. Nope, there he is. There
So sorry,
go.
guys. Incoming call there. So America, the only thing that makes America America is American laws. So failure to follow or be obedient to American laws means that you're no longer in America. That's why it doesn't feel like your country, is because you're in a foreign nation, because that's not America. America was founded upon truth and justice with the Constitution's foundation. We all know in our heart what is right and what's wrong, and what's happening to you is wrong. It doesn't feel right because it's not consistent with your values, your principles, and those are the same as every other American. We have certain values and principles. That's why I say that we need to decide if we want to have the America that we intended to have, with truth, justice, equality, and all these other principles that we believe in. If we do, then the first step is to realize that what you believe in is not real. That's the first step. Because once you realize that what you believe in is not real, then you can come to terms with the fact that I would like it to be real, and I believe that it can be if we do what our laws say to do, if we follow what was created and constructed 245 years ago. So I do believe we can get there, but it's going to take the people of the United States first accepting that what I believe in is not real, and then deciding which direction you want to go. If you want to continue to go through unlawfulness, in which case we will look at the outcome. Because again, if you're going to look at the issue and say I'm going to break the law, then that's going to result in a broken outcome, a wrong outcome. But if we look at the issue and we say I'm going to do the right thing, I'm going to follow the law on the issue, then we can know that whatever the outcome is, it will ultimately be right. It may not seem right, but ultimately we know that if we make the right decision, we will have the right outcome. We will reach that place together one way or another. And so I'm not an abolitionist. I know that we have people that are dangerous to society. I'm not advocating that we let dangerous people out. But what I am saying is that we must do it the way that the procedures and processes, the code of conduct that's established and agreed upon. Because if we don't, then what you're producing is unlawful because you're not doing it lawfully. So we first need to say these people, they have unlawful judgments. They're unconstitutional. We can't pick and choose and say these guys got to keep their judgments in place because look at what they did, because we don't know if they're guilty or not. But at the same time, I don't want people out that are a danger to society. So we need to take an honest look at these people and say, is this person really a danger? And the majority of people are not, because we know that almost 90% of people in prison are there for something related to drugs. Now, these are people that are hurting, right? So we need to take hurting people, we need to heal them from their hurt so that they don't need drugs anymore. And so we can solve that by some other way. The reality is that only about 3 to 5% of the prison population today are a real danger. Now, those people, yes, we probably don't want out walking on the streets, and I'm not advocating that at all. But if their judgments are unconstitutional, then we have to remove the judgment. And so what we do in that case is we switch them from a criminal incapacitation into a civil incapacitation, because the truth is that justice has nothing to do with punishment. It has nothing to do with vindication. It has nothing to do with paying for your debt that's owed to society. What it has to do with is the healing of those sinners from the hurt that they've experienced. justice is a place of healing. It's not a place of vengeance. It's not a place of vengeance. So we need to change the focus of the system and say, I want to love my brothers and sisters. I want to love my mothers and fathers, my children, my grandchildren. These are all our family, and we want to see them get healed from their hurt so that they don't continue to hurt other people. That's what I'm saying needs to be done. The issue of morality must be a matter of public health and not a matter of punitive vengeance.
But yeah, there is a very big difference between vengeance and in healing. It really is. Yeah, and justice. You've got.
Sorry, I can't hear you here.
Okay. There's a very big difference between vengeance and justice, no doubt. On the other hand, I look at it as, for myself personally, it's the vindication.
I can't hear you. 1 second.
Okay. It's can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
You there?
Yes. Can you hear me now? Maybe you're out. Power. It happens every now and then. It's what they call the glitch. I think this is going well just the same. We needed a little bit of a mini break, maybe. But as soon as he's getting back, I'm going to hope that there we go. I can hear you. I got you.
I can't hear you.
Okay. I should do this under closed caption, maybe. Let me see if I can do that. That would be interesting. Let me see something here.
I'm hearing.
Use mic application. I don't know how to do that. What's that? I can hear you. I can hear you fine. Are we back?
Test.
Check 1, 2, 3. Check. Check test. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No? Okay.
I'm going to log off and I'll come back on.
There you go.
Okay. Yes. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know what happened here.
Nope, that's okay. The thing is, again, folks, I can't make this crap up. I really can't. This gentleman here has a case that's being heard by the Supreme Court on June the 6th, and it's about deprivation of rights, of your civil rights. And when you're wrongfully accused, wrongfully arrested, you kind of just say, I want my just desserts. I want to even the tables. And we do this. It's part of human nature to do it, because when we get beaten up, sometimes we can, DC will fight what he's proposing. There's a good chance that DC will be fighting what he's proposing, but let's hope not. Yeah, I could hear him earlier. He couldn't hear me. Here we go.
I hear you now. I can hear you again.
Right on. For a moment.
Sorry, guys.
Oh, it happens. But you're going to fight a battle. Heath earlier said DC's going to fight what you're proposing.
That's not true. So there's a couple of reasons why, and I can totally understand why you would think that. I had that concern for a very long time as well. But so 2.5 months ago, roughly, Justice Gorsuch with the United States Supreme Court, Justice Gorsuch released a judicial notice, right? And in this judicial notice, what he said was, and this went to every single federal judge in the entire nation, every federal judge. What he said that most prisoners are being prisoned illegally and unlawfully, unconstitutionally, because the courts that rendered the decision chose to proceed under administrative law and not common law. He went on to say that most of the children that are being taken by these court systems from the families are illegal, unlawful, and unconstitutional, because the courts are choosing to proceed under administrative law and not common law. And then he had a third element, which said that Most of the property that's being taken from the people of the United States is being done illegally, unlawfully, and unconstitutionally because the courts are choosing to proceed under administrative law versus common law. Now, what does that mean? To know what administrative law, we need to first look at the branches of government to understand what that means. So we have three branches of government, separate but equal branches of government. The legislative branch, according to Clause 1, Article 1 of the United States Constitution, says all legislative power is vested in a Congress of the United States consisting of a Senate and a House of Representatives. So all power to create law is vested in the Congress of the United States. The people create the laws. We create the laws, and then we federate them out to the states for application administration. Now, the executive branch is responsible for enforcing the laws, but they enforce the laws as written. They don't create law because all legislative power is vested in Congress, but they are there to enforce the laws. So a prosecutor, law enforcement, police officers, they're all part of the executive branch of government, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the judicial branch is what's known as the administrative branch because they are there to administer laws. So when a judge makes a ruling and calls it case law, that is called administrative law. So when courts choose to rely upon case law to make a determination as to the outcome, that would be the courts relying upon administrative law and not common law. You see, case law is not law. And so to call it law is confusing. It's misleading and it's a lie because judges have no constituted authority to be able to create law. That would be legislating from the bench. So when judges create rulings that are not consistent with what the Constitution says, well, this whole argument of stare decisis, of the building of these cases and relying upon a judge-made ruling to make a determination as to whether or not your constitutional rights have been violated, as opposed to the Constitution's clear words and narrative, would be them relying upon the incorrect item, because judges do not create law. The people create the law. It's codified in the Constitution. So if my constitutional rights have been violated and I go to the court and I say, I had my rights violated, they should go to the Constitution to make that determination as to whether or not my rights are violated, because their oath is written to the Constitution directly, right? But instead, they go to the flawed decision of the man that came before them, or the flawed decision of the man that came before him. That is relying upon administrative law, which is not law. So when they choose to rely upon a judge-made ruling, then that means that their oath is not with the Constitution, but instead upon the flawed decision of the man that comes before them. These judges are supposed to be independent, and they're directly their oath is directly written to the Constitution. And when the Constitution under Article 6 says the judges in every state shall be bound thereby anything in the Constitution or laws of any state contrary notwithstanding, then that means that the Constitution establishes your obligations. You made a promise to fulfill a future outcome through the oath that you took. And as a result, when you fail to fulfill that promise, you have already implicitly invited punishment in the form of perjury, extortion, and these other crimes, because you made a promise that you would do it, and you've already implicitly invited punishment should you fail to fulfill that promise. So these are crimes that are being committed, and the deprivation of rights under color of law is a very serious offense. It is an offense that is actually punishable as prescribed by law with death. So let me give you a quick example. So Clause 1 of Amendment 5 to the United States Constitution says, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. Now that's clear. You got to have an indictment by a grand jury before holding someone over for a capital or an infamous crime. Now, an infamous crime is defined by Title 18, subsection 4083 as any crime punishable by more than 1 year imprisonment in a penitentiary, right? So if you can get more than 1 year, that is an infamous crime. Now, the United States Supreme Court did come out in a case called United States versus Coachman, and they said that it's not the amount of time that you get sentenced to that makes it infamous, but rather the amount of time that you can be sentenced to that makes it infamous. So you have gross misdemeanors that are still infamous crimes because you can get 5 years for them. Even if you're only sentenced to 3 months, that is still an infamous crime. And according to the Constitution, you must have an indictment by a grand jury before holding someone over for that offense. In other words, before arresting them. You cannot hold a person over without treating them as though they're innocent, right? By allowing them to come in and confront the accusations that are against them. Because if you're arresting them without giving them an opportunity to confront the accusations against them, well, now you are presuming that they're guilty based upon the mere fact of the charge. So if you charge someone with a crime without giving them an opportunity to be able to confront those accusations, Guess what? It is no longer innocent until proven guilty. It is now the opposite, guilt until proven innocent. And that's exactly what's happening across the country. That's what happened to you, my brother, is that you were tried by a trial by affidavit. Now, a trial by affidavit, what happens, and this goes back to 1628, the stamp tax. Our founders are very, very well aware of what this is and what happens and what it does. But what happens is that an accuser comes forward with information, right? And then they take that information, they reduce it to writing in the form of an affidavit. Now, at common law, an affidavit is considered truth. Now, truth cannot be rebutted because it's truth, right? So when I come forward and I say, yes, this happened to me, officer, I want you to go and arrest this person, they take that information, reduce it to an affidavit, and then that police officer says, yep, I attest under sworn oath that these are facts, truthfully correct and whatever. Well, that officer was not a witness, but yet that officer is presenting this information as though it's facts, which now you are now arrested and charged because of the affidavit that was factually presented. And what happens is that your right to confront your accusers evaporates the moment you're charged by affidavit. You can't put that information on the stand and cross-examine it. Therefore, your right to confront your accusers evaporates the moment that the information becomes the accusing body or the instrument to charge you with the crime. Now, that sets up what's known as an irrefutable presumption of guilt. Now, an irrefutable presumption of guilt is the presumption that a person is guilty based upon the mere fact of the charge. You get charged with a crime, you are presumed to be guilty, and as a result, you're going to be treated as though you're guilty. You're deprived of your rights, your right to be able to have your property, to be free, to access your children, to make money, to use your property. These are all things that are taken away the moment that you're presumed to be guilty. Well, an irrefutable presumption of guilt, what happens is that then you have to go out and collect evidence to prove that you're innocent, which is guilt until proven innocent, right? Once again, it's not innocent until proven guilty. And that is a shift in the burden of proof from the prosecution onto the defense. The prosecutor no longer has to prove that you're guilty. You now have to prove that you're innocent, right? And never, ever, ever, not in American constitutional laws nor in international law, does the defendant have to prove their innocence. That would be a violation of international human rights standards. So you never have to prove that you're innocent. But this particular situation, it results as a result of the breakdown of due process when the system focuses on speed and efficiency as opposed to established procedures and process. So when the system itself focuses on speed and efficiency, you see a breakdown of the system, and then there's a shift in the burden of proof. Now you have to prove you're innocent, and they no longer have to prove that you're guilty. So that's the breakdown of the system. That's where we're at today. That's why 98% of all convictions come by way of plea bargain. That's 98% of all criminal defendants that don't even get to tell their side of the story, and that is an egregious failure of the justice system. So again, the scenario is this. There's three ways to charge a person with a crime. One is a presentment to a grand jury, one is an indictment from a grand jury, and the other is information. So we've already talked about indictment, right? That must be done for any capital or infamous crime. But information as a charging instrument, according to Title 18, subsection 555, information can only be used in cases of misdemeanors, non-infamous crimes, okay? So you can only use information as a charging instrument for misdemeanors. You cannot use them for felonies. However, Oklahoma, for example, Article 1, Section 17 of its Constitution says the prosecuting attorney can charge by information or indictment as required by law. So these prosecutors in the state of Oklahoma have said that I have the ability to use my discretion to decide who gets an indictment and who does not, and therefore I'm going to choose information because that's easy for me. But that particular provision of Oklahoma State Constitution is not unconstitutional on its face because it's actually directing the prosecutor to go out and determine what is the correct charging instrument and charge accordingly, right? But they're making a decision to exercise their discretion abusively because the Supreme Court has long held that you can use discretion with regard to your power, but you cannot use discretion with regard to your obligation. If there's a constitutional obligation, that's non-discretionary. You must perform it. So when a prosecuting attorney decides that he's going to charge by information and rely upon an inferior state law to charge a person with a felony or an infamous crime, he's relying upon an inferior law to deprive a person of rights secured by enumerated in the Constitution of the United States. When that happens, that is the definition of deprivation of rights under color of law. Title 18, subsection 242. Because 242 says any person who, under the color of any state statute, ordinance, custom, or regulation, deprives any person of any rights secured by the Constitution, commits that crime. So when a prosecutor relies upon an inferior state law or a law that is not even law because it was made by a judge-made ruling, which cannot create law, when you rely upon judge-made rulings or you rely upon an inferior state law to deprive a person of a right guaranteed by the Constitution, you just committed a felony. And that felony is per se, meaning that I don't have to prove that you intended to do it. All elements of the crime are met the moment that you breach the obligation. All I have to do is show that you breached an obligation constitutionally codified, and now you're guilty of the crime because you've already implicitly invited punishment through your oath or affirmation. Your knowledge and willfulness derives from the promise that you made. If you make a promise to do something and then you don't do it, I don't have to show that you intended to do it because you promised to do it, right? That's what makes it per se. So we don't have to prove that they intended to breach their obligation. All we have to do is show that they did breach it, and now all elements of the crime have been met, and now you have a crime, a very serious offense. So when a prosecuting attorney decides that he's going to do something unlawful, rely upon the inferior law, and he's going to deprive a person of rights secured by the Constitution, he's going to take information just like this, right here at the top, information. When you take information and you say, I want to hold this person over for this offense, there's a felony. The evidence is in this paperwork right here. Right there, it's done. When that prosecuting attorney hands it to the judge, that judge has a duty and responsibility to ensure that the power that he exercises is consistent with his authority. If he chooses to exercise his power based upon someone else's abuse of power, then the power he exercises is no power at all. So when this judge accepts this information and says, this looks good to me, I'm going to hold this person over for this offense, right, and have him arrested without having the proper charge and instrument, now you have conspiracy to deprive rights, Title 18, subsection 241. When this judge then signs this order, hands it to the officer, and says, here, officer, go out and make this arrest, right? This officer, he has a duty and responsibility to ensure that the power he exercises is consistent with his authority. If he exercised power based upon someone else's abuse of power, he himself has no power at all. So when the officer says, this looks good, without the proper charge and instrument, I'm going to go out and make this arrest, well, now you have all three of them is tied up in a conspiracy to deprive rights, Title 18, subsection 241. You also have all three of them in a deprivation of rights under color of law, Title 18, subsection 242. And now you also have kidnapping, Title 18, 1201, because the state did not have lawful authority to be able to perform that arrest because they did not have the proper documentation to perform the arrest. And now you have a crime that, as prescribed by law, is punishable by death, because any time that you have a deprivation of rights in the color of law that occurs in conjunction with the kidnapping, the punishment is death. It's a very serious offense, very serious. And this is happening across the entire country. Right now, today, there are more than 700,000 people that are imprisoned illegally and unlawfully because the states have chosen to proceed without following the proper procedures or process established and codified in the Constitution of the United States. There are 13 states in the nation right now today that do not conduct a grand jury at all, including the state of Washington, the state of Connecticut, the state of Pennsylvania, the state of Michigan, the state of Oklahoma. These are states that are acting in direct, willful defiance of the United States Constitution. There isn't one single person imprisoned in any one of those states that is there legally and lawfully because the states did not follow the proper procedures to put them there. Not one of them received an indictment by a grand jury. Every single one of them were charged by information that is unlawful, it's unconstitutional, and it's time to get our brothers and sisters back home and for America to get out of the slavery institution once and for all. So my point is, going back to the very beginning, is this. If Justice Gorsuch releases a notice and says that what is happening across the country is unlawful and unconstitutional, and he's saying that because that's the very heart of my argument, then guess what, brothers and sisters? The court's on my side. They're on my side, right? We reached quorum last week. We have 5 of the 9 justices that are already in support of what I'm doing. They've agreed to hear the case. I'm going to be there on June 6th, 2024. That's why this tour starts this Saturday, is because they support this. I've had dinners with governors. I've had dinners with attorney generals in the last few months, numerous ones. I had dinners with senators. Every single one of them have said to me that they believe in what I'm doing privately, but they will not believe in it. They will not let anybody know publicly. And at first that really bothered me. Because I'm like, it's wrong. But you know what that tells me? That tells me that the hardest part's going to be the journey getting there, because they're not going to help me get there. But once I get there, there's not going to be a fight because they all believe in it anyway. This is America, and I'm fighting for American laws. I'm fighting for the preservation of America. I'm fighting for the freedom, equality, and love and care for our own fellow countrymen. A patriot is defined as one who loves and defends his country, right? But if you love something, then destruction should never be an optional outcome for that love. I love this country. I'm as much a patriot as this country has ever made, right? I want to see my country successful. I do not want to see destruction of it because that which is loved cannot lead to destruction. So, as a patriot is not one that calls to arms, because it's not a patriot is not one that says, let's go get our guns, let's go out and fight a war, let's kill each other, because that would lead to destruction. A patriot is one who uses words, because patriotism is simply a dialogue between your fellow man and the larger world as a whole. Not only what is good about your country, but how it can be better. A patriot loves his country. But how can you say that you love your country if in the same breath you say that you don't love your fellow countrymen? Because our country is simply an aggregate of the people. I've been back and forth across this country 9 times over this last year. I'm very proud to have been given the opportunity to learn about how beautiful and amazing this country is. There is beauty everywhere in this nation. It doesn't matter what state you're in. But the beauty isn't just what we see. The beauty is who we are. Because we have some amazing people who have been nothing but amazing to me. And I want that amazingness to be what the world sees. Because no one can be proud of what they do. Nobody can be proud of the hypocrisy that they accept, because they don't recognize the fact that what we preach overseas is in conflict with what we practice here at home. I want us to reconcile those two things, because in order for us to be great, in order for us to be a beacon, in order for us to be free, then we must ensure that our domestic policy is not in conflict with our foreign policy. So, no, we're going to win this, brother. Believe in America. Let me handle the upper end here. I can totally understand why you don't think that this would happen, but I assure you that I got God on my side here. And when God gets involved, things aren't near as big as they used to be. This isn't that big of a deal. This is simply getting the people to understand the truth of what they're doing and how destructive it is to our nation and harmful it is to our people. And they've come to understand that. The court has agreed with it. Therefore, the court is protecting me. I have nothing to be afraid of. Thank you.
You know, I've noticed a lot of people have been saying, oh, this is going to be the biggest election. You got to vote this time around, blah, blah, blah. I keep telling people, or now I've come to the realization, let me rephrase that. I've come to the realization, and I try to explain to people or tell people that we've got to start looking microscopically at our counties, at our towns, who we have in leadership positions, what their values are. 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I went to my county commissioners. I went to my sheriff's department. Got to tell you, I was siding with Texas. Texas counties were saying, hey, guess what? We're going to put in laws that if you're not a legal citizen, you can't be here. And you're going to have to, because you're a criminal. When you cross the border illegally, you've broken the law. Right. And we've got a whole White House administration, the DOJ, Merrick Garland. We've got FBI Ray. We've got Homeland Security Mayorkas. We've got all these people in leadership positions. And it's treasonous what's happening. And I look at what you just explained to me. I didn't realize this, but when someone is usurping their authority, thinking they're above the law and they can just put a person's name through mud, put them through a financial wreck, and think nothing of it, and eat breakfast tomorrow morning to do it again to still another person. And I just found out that this deputy that did this to me did this to another individual in another county in another town. And the thing is, how do they just keep going from job to job to job doing stuff like this?
Yeah. So what we're dealing with right now is what's called cognitive dissonance, right? And so what cognitive dissonance is that when your actions and morals don't align with one another, then you feel discomfort, right? In order to be happy and stuff, you must have your actions and your morals aligned. But what happens is that when your actions don't align with your morals, then you then you start to justify your behavior, right? So they say, oh, if we don't use plea bargains and don't do this, then look at all the people that are going to get away. Or if we don't do this, look at how this murderer is gonna get off, right? Or if we don't do this, then look at these children that are going to be hurting, right? So they justify their actions which don't align with their morals in order to not feel the discomfort of knowing that they're not being true and congruent as a person. Well, so I don't believe that judges and prosecutors in law, I don't believe that they are inherently evil, but just as the philosopher Nietzsche said, he said that those who fight monsters should see to it that in process they don't become a monster. Justice is the monster. They become the monster. But they become the monster because over time, if all that you see is evil, then eventually that's all you believe in. So they start to justify their behavior because inherently they want to do good, right? They do. They want to do good. But when they're doing wrong, to offload the feelings so that the discomfort, then they start to say, oh, if I don't do it, then look what would happen, right? So they let go of that hurt. Now, when you study narcissism or you study liars out of the DSM, and you start to study the treatment for them, it's well known that when you deal with a tyrant, even John Locke and Jacques Rousseau and most of the founders, they all said that the best weapon against a tyrant is the truth. Now, why is that? Because the tyrant is the truth. The truth.
Right.
So when you speak the truth to a liar, that truth goes into them and it bothers them. It offends them, right? And so then they lash out at you and they say, oh, I feel uncomfortable because of you. You did this to me. Well, it wasn't me. It's the only thing that has the power to offend you is the truth. If you're bothered by the things I say, you might want to look inside and find out why you're bothered by the things I'm saying, because the truth has the power, not me, right? But when the truth comes into you, what we typically will do is we will give that person the ability to offload that toxic energy. So they will come at us and they'll start accusing us, or they'll start saying things about us and lashing out at us, because that's how they get rid of the feeling discomfort inside of them. That's why most self-help books and most gurus all say, don't worry about what someone says. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with them. So when you use the truth in a combat method, you speak it to them as a liar. Tell them the truth. You're a criminal. You might think you're a judge, but you're a piece of shit, right? Because you're committing more crimes every single day than these people that you're locking up. You're a criminal, right? And as a liar, because remember, perjury is a lie. So therefore, anybody committing perjury is a liar. So now we know what they are. We know that they're liars. And so now we can learn how to combat a liar, and you combat a liar by the truth. Now, what a liar also does is they typically project. So what they accuse you of is something that they themselves are doing. So when they say you're a criminal, we're simply spinning around on them. You're projecting on me. Let's become a mirror. You're the criminal, not me.
Yep.
You are, right? Because you're projecting what you're feeling inside on me, and I'm not going to allow that anymore because you're the criminal. So what happens is don't be offended by the things that they say to you. Use those as a mechanism to know what it is that's hurting them inside. So if they call you a criminal, you know that they're a criminal. If they say you're a shitty parent, say, you're a shitty parent, right? Because we know that they're liars. What they accuse you of is what they're doing. So again, when you argue with them, right? When you argue with them, you're giving them the ability to offload that toxic energy. If you turn around and you walk away and let the truth do the work, it doesn't matter what they say about you. It doesn't matter what they call you. Don't worry about that at all. Then that energy has to return to them, and then they have to deal with it. And once they start to deal with it, then they have to come to terms with the fact that my actions don't align with my morals. These judges know. I've told them. Every single judge in the country is aware of what we're doing. In this case, they've been made aware. They know as they sit on the bench that what they're doing is illegal. They know it. And eventually, what they're doing is they're saying, do I want to align my morals with my actions and thus say, morally, I'm a criminal, I'm a piece of shit because my actions are a piece of shit? Or do you want to realign your actions with your morals, right? Do you want to take your actions, correct them to align with what you believe you are? Mm-hmm. If you believe you're a leader and you're leading our country with honor, then, just as Justice Hugo Black said in 1960, honorable men honor the law. If you want to be an honorable man, then you will honor the law. If you don't, then you're a piece of shit. You're a criminal. And I'm going to call you out on it. And so that's what we're doing. We're going to call out all these public officials, all these judges. We're going to make them decide, do you want to be a criminal? And if you are, then I'll be damned if I'm going to call you honorable, because there isn't a single bit of honor in breaking the law and disobeying the will of people and destroying our nation. There's no honor in that.
That's correct. I was going to say it earlier when you were talking about truth. Truth is indisputable. I mean, when you've got facts and you've got truths, you can't dispute it.
Right.
And the words that I like words, and you've really pinpointed a lot of things with me here so far with this discussion. Thank you, by the way. But the thing that I like to use the word prevaricator, because when I use the word prevaricator to a person's face, and I'm calling them a liar, and they don't know it, that really makes me feel good, because I realize that these people just don't know how low they can really be.
Yeah.
And all, with what you and I were talking about, I said I was going to do a program by myself earlier about freedom of speech and talk about things like death to America, death to Americans, I am Hamas. Just those three words I am free to say if I want to say them. But if I say I am Hamas, I should immediately have handcuffs on, because that means I'm a terrorist, because that's what Hamas is recognized as, a terrorist organization. And if you say death to Americans or death to America, it's like, I wish I could just send you back wherever you came from. And in some of your cases, just put you on a boat and put you out to sea and see what happens, because people don't realize we may have the freedom of speech and the freedom to peacefully protest. Burning flags, burning buildings, cars is not peaceful.
Yeah.
Those people should be arrested.
Just because you have a right doesn't make it right. And that's exactly it. Yes. Just because we are free to do certain things doesn't make it a good thing. That's the whole concept of a law, is that a law is created so that we can have boundaries within our society. So if we want to preserve our right to live, we must give up our right to kill. And thus the law arises. The law creates obligations. That's all that a law is. A law creates obligations. I have an obligation to not kill someone. I have an obligation not steal from someone. I have an obligation not assault someone. If I breach my obligation, then their right to not be assaulted has been violated. They have no right to not be assaulted until I breach my obligation. So in the natural state of man, only the strong survive, right? So in the natural state of man, we have the right to kill, we have the right to rape, we have the right to steal, we have all these rights that we don't want, because in the natural state of man, you don't have the right to live, because you're the weakest man. Only the strong survive. So I can steal from you if I want to, or I can rape you if I want to. Because that's the natural state of man. So in man's natural state, those rights that we have are not things that we want. They're not good. So in order to make sure that you have the right to live, I must give up my right to be able to kill you, right? And in order for me to have the right to live, you must give up your right to be able to kill me. And thus there arises a law. The right to live is established by our obligation to not kill. So yes, you're absolutely right. Some things that we can do are not good. So simply because we have the right doesn't make it right. We need to care enough about our brothers and sisters, once again, to want to see them happy. And that comes by our obligation to protect their happiness, right? To not infringe on their environment to where they can't be happy, right? And so if I love my brother, I'm not going to steal from him. If I love my brother, I'm not going to sleep with his wife. If I love my brother, I'm not going to kill him or imprison him because I love him. So you see, my obligation and my right to be able to do things to my brother doesn't make it right. Because if he can't have his own happiness, then he's not free to develop his faculties. And so that's the whole concept of that's the whole concept of our nation, is that we are to preserve the life, liberty, and environment of happiness of others. I can't imprison you. I can't take your life, nor can I do anything to your environment to where you can't find happiness. I'm not responsible for making you happy. You got to find your own. But I can't infringe on your happiness. That's why we need to. Our system of government was small because you don't step out of line. You live your life. Let him live his life. She lives her life. Don't interfere with those lives, and let's be free to be who we are and develop who we are. Don't do things on. Don't step out of lane, and thus the Constitution was clear. It's very simple: life, liberty, and the environment to find happiness.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Heath had made this statement. I'm going to do a little time going back in time. Plea bargains are typically among those who cannot afford an attorney. At my summons, which is recognizing, or the judge recognizing me, in his courtroom as a criminal, by the way, that's the way I viewed it. That's my perception.
Yeah. Yeah.
He saw me as a criminal. In the meantime, this is a summons. The prosecuting attorney actually wanted to plea bargain at that moment.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I'm going the distance, because they wanted a little something to win the case. They wanted to take it from a felony down to a misdemeanor, and they wanted to make it like a disorderly conduct or a public nuisance. And by the way, again, this is 4 months after the incident. And I'm like, no, I'm fighting this. So it's really about money, how much money they could get out of you. Because if I could have plea bargained, would have been a misdemeanor. I could have kept my guns, gave them $50, $100, or whatever, and walked away. But because of the nature of this warrant, because of the fact that it got out in the media so harshly, like a flipping wildfire, it got to the point for me, it's like, you know what? I got to fight this. I want to fight this. Yeah, you made me a contender. And I've been working with people, Tanawah. Am I pronouncing your name properly, Tanawah?
Yeah, it's Tanawah, but yeah, it's fine.
Tanawah, okay. Yahweh Tanawah. There we go.
Tanawah, yeah.
I know a lot of people around the country, around the world, and one that I really, really like out of Canada. It's like, don't you think that maybe there's a possibility we still need some kind of a regulator in courtrooms for situations as such to say, is this real or is this not? An advocacy group, something. Is
there? So there's a couple of interesting points there, and that's that the purpose of the judge was to protect the minority from the majority. That was the purpose of the judge. So you have the right to due process of the law because the judges in every state have the duty to ensure those rights are provided. So the purpose of the judge was to protect the defendant. That was their job. That was what they were created to do. They were there to protect the defendant. The purpose of the prosecutor was to negotiate on behalf of the defendant for the best contract terms, right? The prosecutor was meant to be an advocate on behalf of the defendant. Both the judge and the prosecutor, they were originally designed to protect the defendant, and that's not at all what has happened, because we have a complete switch in the system. Remember, everything is backwards, right? We're relying upon the lowest form of law instead of the highest form of law. We are guilty until proven innocent, right? We have the state choosing to take a side and now also acting as the judge. Every single thing about our system is upside down and backwards. So if the judge is there today is there to judge the defendant, then we have to say that, well, that's the wrong direction. So we need to understand that everything is backwards. The judge and prosecutor were not intended to be against the defendant. They were both intended to protect the defendant. That was their original purpose. So you're absolutely right. The purpose of the prosecutor was to not to prosecute, in that they were meant to be an advocate. And all through history, a prosecutor carried the title of advocate. That's why I'm an advocate. I'm not an attorney, right? An attorney, their first duty is to the court. My first duty is to the people of the United States. I swore an oath to it and to them. I protect them. I could give a damn about the judicial machinery. My oath, my obligation is to protect them. That's why I'm an advocate. I am not a solicitor. I'm not barred by them. I'm protected by the people. I represent them by oath or affirmation. So there's a difference between these terms. I'm an advocate. I fight from the highest form of law. I do not come down off it to argue down the weeds with the judge made rulings that they want me to argue in. I tell them, no, you come up to my level, argue with me at that level. And when you do, you lose because there's nothing that a judge can say that's contrary to those words written in that Constitution. So when we stop arguing case law, we stop arguing state statutes and ordinances and customs and judge-made rulings, and we realize that every law that is not the Constitution is unconstitutional simply by virtue of the fact that it is not the Constitution. Anything that's not the Constitution is unconstitutional. Therefore, when you argue the Constitution, you go home. You're free because that law has declared your freedom. So you don't argue any other law because no other law is constitutional. Argue the Constitution, rise up to that level, and when you do, you will defeat the system every single time. That's coming from a man that knows. I'm an advocate. I graduated from the most expensive university in the United States with distinction on the South Lawn of the White House, right? I didn't come from a rich family, but I've certainly been blessed by this nation and my brothers and sisters and the service that I provided within the military. And as a result, you can listen to what I'm saying. You can know, come up to the highest form of law. Because when you deal with military combat operations, we know that whoever has the elevated position has superior tactical capability. So if I'm on the highest form of law, why in the hell am I going to come down off of it to argue down the weeds in case law with them? I'm going to maintain my superior tactical capability. I'm going to tell them to come up to my level. And when they do, they're going to lose because I have superior tactical capability.
You know, Tanawah, this has been an absolute, I could go, I think, and I'm going to say this, I'm hoping that I can work with you. I'm hoping that, you know, we can actually get some balls rolling together.
Yeah.
I think that when states, in this case, state entity governments, see, you were mentioning the three branches of government. I'm sorry, but let me update you. It's actually 5 branches. We have the bureaucratic branch, and we've got the false media branch of government with the propaganda. So I throw those in there. All in all, this has been a wonderful conversation.
Yeah.
I know this from some of the comments, in particular from my very close friend of mine, Heath Gilbert. We've got to be closing soon. Is there anything you'd like to say about this? I know you're going to be in Jefferson City Saturday. I believe you're going to be in Des Moines. Will be your 8th stop. Your 9th stop is in Lincoln, Nebraska. And then you're going to be in Topeka, Kansas. Is there anything you want to, I mean, you've got 40 days pushing here of hitting all the state capitals. What do you want to tell us, please, sir?
So first off, I want to say that I can't speak to the past, right? And we can't change it. There's no magic time machine that's gonna go back and remove the things that have happened. But in order to be able to have a future, we need to decide how we're going to move forward together in a peaceful manner because we are in a very, very dangerous and precarious situation. We're standing on the precipice of destruction of this nation right now. And I don't think that any person would believe otherwise. So we need to decide, is destruction our lot or do we want to go a different direction? Because you know what? We didn't get ourselves in this situation. It's not the people that caused this, right? It wasn't our fault. Racism has no place in America. Economicism has no place in America. We are all free and we are all equal. But to do that, we need to accept the equality and uniqueness of every single person. So any nation that's being destroyed by racial and economic discriminations has to first recognize the fact that every single person within that society is equally as important. The president of the United States cannot do his job without the garbage man. The garbage man cannot do his job without the president of the United States doing his job. Therefore, every single person within our society is equally as important, right? They all fulfill a purpose. So God didn't create anything to be abused and trodden upon by his fellow man. We need to go ahead and recognize the fact that every single person has got unique qualities and beauty. I can tell you that I've spoken with probably now millions of people imprisoned or jailed or past incarcerated here in America. I've talked to millions of them, and I'm going to tell you right now, they are not what you think that they are, right? These are some of the most creative, most driven individuals that you would ever meet. We have people that the art that I've seen from some of these people is just incredible. I mean, Smithsonian Institute quality. You know, we've got people that create a multinational, multi-million dollar drug enterprise. They are natural born CEOs, right? They were misdirected. We have gang members that are leading some thousands of some of the most obstinate and obtrusive people, divisive people that there are. These are natural born managers, right? So we've got all this talent, this amazing talent that we're locking up in a prison and saying, you're a piece of shit. I want to take that talent and I want to redirect it in a good direction, because we have some amazing people that are sitting there in prison that are thrown away by society that don't deserve to be thrown away because they have way too much talent to offer this nation, that it's a shame to put them there. It is an absolute shame and disgrace to do that. So I want to step up and say, not not what you have done, but what has the system done to how have we failed you? How has the people failed you? I want to do that. And I want to take these people and I want to harness it. I want to put them in a better direction, because that's the way that we're going to find prosperity and hope for our nation, is when we stop hurting each other and we accept the fact that the best way to proceed is with love and care of each other, because that's the only thing that's going to preserve humanity. So that's what I'd like to say. Now, this tour, again, we start on Saturday, just like you said. So starting on Saturday, in Jefferson City, Missouri. 40 press conferences over 40 days. We're going to go through the Northern Loop first, starting in Jefferson City, ending in Topeka, Kansas. Then we start the second 10-day loop, that's starting in Denver, Colorado, ending in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We start the Southern Loop, that's in Austin, the next 10 days. That'll be starting in Austin, ending in Tallahassee. Then we hit Atlanta, heading up north, ending in Jersey, or sorry, Delaware. And then we hit New Jersey, coming all the way up around, ending back in Washington, D.C. By the time I finish these 40 press conferences, there will not be a single news station in the country that will not be there to meet me, greet me, and watch me as I walk in the Supreme Court to offer oral arguments on behalf of people of the United States, you guys, to speak on your behalf, to present this situation. And as of today, the Solicitor General is not going to oppose this, because the Solicitor General is aware that any argument that he presents as a counter argument would be seditious in nature in open court. That would be an act of treason. And as a result, the way that it sounds right now is that this is going to go unopposed by government, which means that I will be presenting on both the government as well as also the group of petitioners, the people of the United States. It's a real honor to be able to do this. So this tour, just know that I gave up and went this direction about 8 years ago because it was the right thing to do, and because I have the technical expertise and capability to be able to do what I'm doing right now. I don't get paid. My clients don't have money. I do this because I love this, because I love my country, I love my people, and I know that if I focus on money, that would be what my passion is. I'm passionate about justice. I'm passionate about making things right. So I don't get paid. I don't ask for money. We operate only on donations. That's it. So in 8 years, we've never been paid a cent. So if you're interested in supporting the tour, if you'd like to help get us across the country, we have a need for gas. We have limited resources, but if you would like to be able to support us, we would welcome the blessing. I would very much appreciate it. We got a lot of needs still to get across the country. If you do, we got Cash App, we got Chime, we've got Venmo, we've got PayPal. They're all exactly the same. We shall be free. That's WESHALLBEFREE. We shall be free, and every cent counts. Every cent that we receive, it goes 100% to providing for taxes, permits, gas, fuel, other needs and essentials. We don't spend a single cent on this, on anything other than this campaign for you and your family, to fight for you. So I would very much appreciate, welcome those blessings. Don't take anything out of your family's mouth, but if it's in your heart to be able to support, we would accept the donations. And thank you so much. When we come to your city, please come out. Please tell your story. We want to make sure that these stories are told. If you have never had your story told, be sure to come out. I'll give you the platform. We'll give you a place to talk. The people of the United States are going to be listening. Tell your story. Tell about what happened to your family. Thank you so much. God bless all of you.
Tanawah, thank you so very, very much, sir. Can you stay on a couple more minutes after I end? That's only going to take another 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah. We need to get on the road here soon, but yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a couple more minutes. Thank you guys so much. God bless you. God bless your family. I look forward to seeing you either out on the road or when I emerge from the court on June 6, 2024. Thank you so much. God bless.
God bless you, sir. You know, we can't give up hope, folks, and we can't give up on mankind around us. I think that's what I got the most out of this. We've got to blend mercy with forgiveness. Yeah, you guys are hearing me use the word forgiveness. That's the first time, huh? I do. I've got to try to find that somehow. But we've got to blend the mercy with forgiveness, and we can't give up and on our fellow man. We just can't. It's going to get better, folks. It has to get better. I don't want to say it can't get any worse, but I think we already know it probably could. But in the meantime, at the end of the day, all I can say is God bless America. Love you very much. Thank you for joining me. And we'll see you around real soon. Peace.
A generation of my time.